Hi, this is Paula, and I'm coming to you from my house with my fancy booth. This is Common Book Show, and we're here today with Richard and Virginia and Sale, and of course my son Tom on drums. And I am sitting here with a book that I started to read recently. It's ostensibly an autobiography of Shaw, although he didn't write his own autobiography per se. Somebody compiled essays that he wrote about his life, personal essays, and they put them in an order that made up an autobiography. So he's talking about the theater. He had gotten really ill for a while after he was writing plays and working in the theater. And he said, but the theater struck me down like the veriest weakling. I sank under it like a baby fed on starch. My very bones began to perish, so that I had to get them planed and gouged by accomplished surgeons. I fell from heights and broke my limbs in pieces. The doctor said, "This man has not eaten meat for 20 years. He must eat it or die." I said, "This man has not been going to the London this man has been going to the London theaters for 3 years, and the soul of him has become insane and is feeding unnaturally on his body." And I was right. I did not change my diet, but I had myself carried up to the mountain where there was no theater, and there I began to revive. Too weak to work, I wrote books and plays. So I just thought that was he was one of the early proponents of a plant-based diet, and he also, because of he loved animals and he didn't want to harm them, so he was not going to listen to the doctor who told him he had to eat meat. He was going to follow his own medicine, and he was right. So I like that quote. And so, and now Richard and I have read an article by that John Ronson about an artist, and the artist is a really odd guy. Do you want to start talking about this guy, or do you want me to start, Richard?
No, I would be happy to start talking about him.
Okay.
This guy reminded me of one of Cheech and Chong's skits. Sal, you know who Cheech and Chong were?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say we know who they are.
Now,
Yeah.
and this is the shall we call it the contradiction involved in this guy's personality is like what happened in his Cheech and Chong skit. The skit goes like this. Hello, Mr. Famous Musician. We brought you in here today to help us because, as you know, marijuana is now legal. So we're doing a commercial for it. So we're paying you money. And all you have to do is say 3 words, and then you get paid, $100,000. He says, fine. What do I have to do? He said, we're going to sing the jingle, and then we're going to hand you a joint, and you just take a puff of the joint, and you say, badass weed. So they do the commercial, no stems, no seeds that you don't need. Acapulco Gold is, and then he goes, badass weed. They go, perfect, thank you, you can go. And he goes, wait a minute. I don't think I did it right. Let's do it again. Now, you could tell in this skit that the musician just wants to keep smoking the dope. But the musician doesn't say that. The musician says, I didn't get it right. I could do it better. You see what I mean? Uh-huh. That's what this article is like. It's about a guy who does paintings when he's on drugs.
Not only when he's on drugs, though, Richard. Also, he alters his perceptions by other things. He specifically says in the article that he doesn't like doing drugs, and he only does them once in order to have the experience so he can do a self-portrait. His capacity, he's very upset, actually, that the only drawings that he does that are popular, that have become famous, are the ones that he's done on drugs. because he's done all kinds of crazy shit to alter his consciousness. Like the one time he plugged up his ears and he put a funnel in his mouth and he tried to hear through his mouth for like 2 weeks. So he could get a different consciousness to make another self-portrait. So I don't think that, I mean, I didn't get the impression that he just wanted to do drugs, because you usually pick a drug of choice and he's doing a different drug every time and not repeating it.
So he was doing a commercial for weed?
No, that was just an analogy.
Example.
Oh, it was this.
That was an analogy.
Yeah, analogy. Thank you.
Well, you know, they're replacing beer tents with weed tents at festivals now.
Oh.
Well, so I mean, I know the drug thing was it was interesting to me, especially since he was doing things like lighter fluid and just really bath salts.
Yeah.
And then doing drawings. I mean, maybe you should show some of the drawings that we're talking about. Some of his self-portraits. It's all he does. He does self-portraits, and he's a really kooky guy. He lives in a building that's like a homeless shelter, near Nashville. And I mean, he was this guy. I love this guy's writing. This John Ronson. I think he's amazing. Oh, hello, Karen. You want to say hi? We're on the show. You want to wave?
Oh, no.
She doesn't. It's my tenant.
Bye-bye.
Didn't have what? Didn't have?
So anyway, if we could see a couple of the.
Sure, thank you. Standing where it sounds.
This is the.
Okay, this is the guy. I don't know if you want the volume on. You want the volume on?
They've got security cameras now, so they can catch people coming in. Here's
Yeah,
ghosts left over
this is
from
the homeless
Halloween
shelter.
party. This is the lobby. I'm not sitting on any furniture down here. There might be bed bugs in it. I don't trust it. They stopped a lot of the bed bugs, but a lot of the people, the Christians, keep spreading them. That's how I try to keep the Christians away from me. I'm Brian Saunders. I get junk mail sometimes where they spell my name wrong in India that says, "Dear Mr. Brain Sander," by accident. I was born in Washington, D.C. I was potty trained at 1.5, was reading at age 2, saw my first porn at a drive-in when I was 6 in the back seat. Started getting in trouble with the law when I was about 10, and then kept getting in trouble until 21. I went to prison, and then when I got out, came to Tennessee, went to college here in Johnson City, and then I've just been doing art ever since. Art has saved my life. It's like the best therapy in the world. This coffee table is a monster beast. It's hard to even walk around this room, but it's my studio. It's organized right now, but it tends to get really out of control at times. Crayons, colored pencils, watercolor pencils, palette, and then all of the acrylics, sketchbook. That's the workspace right there. This is my first self-portrait book, March 30th, 1995. And this is the first one I ever did. Then this one is when I went on the Appalachian Trail. I had 5 pounds of art supplies with me. This is where I saw my first rattlesnake. I put like the rattle like a birthday hat and like black party balloons. They was watching the news during 9/11. And then right away I knew it was bin Laden. Here's where I went to China to become a famous stand-up comedian. Here's me headed to China. I taught myself
come on.
Mandarin
You have
Chinese.
to-
I figured within 1 year.
You have to admit this guy is really out there. You know, I mean,
I know. When did they ever run pornos at a drive-in?
no. He said he went to the drive-in. He didn't see a porno. I don't think that's what he said.
He said I thought he said I saw my first porno at a drive-in while I was in the back seat.
Did he say that?
He did say that, and I'm like, when did they ever show pornos at a drive-in?
Well, the thing I liked about this guy, and I mean, I know I interrupted you, Richard, because I really didn't see him as somebody who who was a drug user. I saw him as an artist who was using drugs to change his consciousness so that he could see himself in a new way. I mean, he's not the only artist who basically does self-portraits. There was a woman, and she used to draw herself in all kinds of crazy get-ups and stuff, or it was a photography. She would photograph herself. She was from Buffalo. I'm pretty sure she did some work at Hall Walls for a while.
Oh,
I'm familiar with with the artist you're speaking of.
Yeah, I just don't remember her
She's-
name.
He was I don't remember either, but she's very talented.
Her name is Cindy
Yeah.
Sherman.
Yeah,
There you go.
exactly.
Okay.
Cindy Sherman. Thank you. So that reminded me. But you know who else? This person, if you think about it, kind of reminds me of that kind of tragic childhood of someone that we both know, who is Dudley.
Hmm.
Do you not see that kind of, what
Yeah.
Dudley had experienced as a child with the drugs and the weird childhood, and also being a very creative person and somebody who is thinks outside the box.
So if a person has a traumatic childhood, they will often find a cure through unusual forms of art.
Or they can. I mean, not everyone's I think everyone's creative in a certain way, but not everyone is creative like that. So, I mean, if you experience trauma as a child, it can come out in a lot of different ways. And in this person's case, I think it's coming out and trying to experience himself through drawings of himself. Trying to figure out who he is by drawing himself over and over again. And just like the one time he said he was on, when he was on, what's the one that you make in a lab?
LSD.
No, not LSD. There's a meth. When he was on crystal meth, he drew the same picture over and over again on top. He was drawing himself over and over again on top and on top and on top, because he said his perception of himself kept changing. So it's like 9 pictures on top of each other. And I thought that was, fascinating, that he, I don't know. I just found him, I found him interesting, and I found him,
Well, there's also a chronological order to his self-portraits. Like, he had a self-portrait when he walked the Appalachian Trail. He had a self-portrait when he went to do comedy in China.
Yeah.
And he has this chronological diary, so to speak,
right. But he does
his
at
portraits
least,
and his images of himself over the years, because even though I looked at those images very briefly, I could see the difference.
right. And he says he does at least 1 and sometimes 3 self-portraits a day.
Interesting.
So think about how many that means,
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of drawing yourself. But I sent Richard the link to this because when I was, for one of the reasons is because of I made this connection like this with our friend Dudley.
Mm.
And the other one was because the Home of the Future is a haven for such people. You often have people that fit a similar description coming through the Home of the Future. So he is like a kindred spirit almost.
Mm. Do you think if he lived in Buffalo, he would find his way to this place?
Oh, definitely. That's what I was thinking while I was reading this. But anyway, I'm sorry. So go ahead, finish off what you were saying about him before I so rudely interrupted you.
So I was wondering how much of what he does is for the drugs and how much of it is for the art.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I think I think you and I have a different perspective on it because you are someone who never engaged in that kind of activity. And I am
Neither did
someone I am someone with the cultural my cultural curiosity led me to those experiences to see what it was like myself. And not I mean I didn't sniff lighter fluid or I didn't do any of those crazy things, but I wanted to see what it was like because I just felt, and I'll tell you the reason for that is because, and I know this won't make sense, but I didn't have any grandparents. And when I realized that not having any grandparents meant that I didn't have any connection to personal history from that period of time, I always wondered, did my grandparents go to a speakeasy? Did my grandparents march? Did they march for the labor unions? Did my grandparents, how did they experience the Depression? What were their experiences during that historical period of time? So when I figured that out at about age 10, I did a lot of things so that when I had grandchildren, I could tell them I experienced this thing that was happening in the zeitgeist. So I did a lot of things specifically for the information so that I could tell my grandchildren, who I have now, but they're a little too young yet. You know? But because I thought if they were ever curious and they ever wanted to know if I tried drugs or if I if I engaged in any of the stuff that was popular, if I took place, if I went to a demonstration against the Vietnam War or any of those things, I could tell them, yes, I did that.
Those must have been cool.
Virginia, did you live through the 60s?
No, well, I lived through them, but I was in grammar school, so I was born in 1957. So, but I do remember them, and I do remember the turmoil, and I do remember my parents talking about the 60s, and I do remember seeing those children being hosed down with the fire hoses in the South. I remember that image being in my living room, and that was the first time that sort of thing was made available through the TV and to people's living rooms.
You're right.
You know, and you know, it's so easy to remove yourself from things that you're not intimate with. But that was a blast in my living room, and I remember seeing it. And I remember my parents talking about it.
And that's the thing. I was also a child in the 60s. But I was in the beginning of the 70s, I was in high school. And that's when I did go to a women's lib meeting. And I did go to a demonstration against the war in Vietnam. And, you know, I found ways to do it because I had this desire to be part of what was happening. I don't know I don't actually know how that happened, but I do, and I remember seeing the Martin Luther King stuff when he was assassinated on TV, and when the spaceships, when the rockets were launched to go to the moon, they brought a television into the classroom. We watched the launch, you know, so there was a lot of that, and those are things you always remember, you know. Mm-hmm. What was the situation with the hosing down of the kids that you were talking about, Virginia?
Well, it was with the Martin Luther King marches, and it was a deliberate strategy that was made to bring the plight of the African Americans into the living rooms. It was deliberate to bring it into people's living rooms. And so America would have no way to deny what's going on. Now, so did Martin Luther King know that the children were going to be hosed down? No, but he knew that the sheriff was like a loose cannon, and he knew
Yeah.
he was going to do something. So he met with the parents, explained the situation, and said that their children would be in a dangerous situation. And the parents felt that it was necessary to do it for the future. So the parents marched with their children, and the children were hosed down with fire hoses. Now, if you've ever seen a fire hose,
Yeah, I know.
they're
Yeah.
lucky they're lucky they survived, and they were knocked down, and the hoses did not stop.
Well, it obviously left an impression on you.
And that was a turning point in the civil rights movement. So Martin Luther King and his advisors were correct that this would be a turning point, and that something would happen. Something did happen, and it was a turning point in the movement. It was then that Bobby Kennedy started voicing to his brother John that something had to be done, that the president needed to make a stand.
Well, it's something that obviously stuck with you. And did it form your own opinions about the situation as an adult?
Well, I will say that my parents formed my opinions as a result. I was raised in a home where experientials and diversities happened in the living room. I was raised in a home where we had all kinds of people from all walks of life in our living room and at our dining room table. So I was raised to accept people for the character, not for necessarily their creed or their race or their gender, whatever. So
I did
so
that
when
with
I
my
saw
daughter,
that,
yeah.
so when I saw that, and my father and my mother sat me down and talked to me about it, I think more of I was horrified that it happened, and I wasn't even sure if it was real or not. And my parents explained to me that it was real, and they explained to me about discrimination in this country like I was an adult. So I think more of it came from my parents, because I thought it was like not real. I thought it was just a movie,
Yeah. Well, yeah, because when you're a kid, anything on TV is like a show. It's not real.
Right.
But I do remember.
I didn't understand the implications of it till later on in life when I was in college, and I took 2 courses in African American history.
Yeah.
That's when I learned that Martin Luther King was strategic and honest with the parents and knew exactly what he was doing when he did it.
Yeah. I just remember on the news when I was a kid, they would warn the parents when there was going to be something on the news that would not be appropriate for children. They would say, you might want your children to leave the room. This is going to be graphic. That was when they started televising the Vietnam War. And I remember my father telling me to go in the other room, and I would listen through the door to try to hear it, because we always watched the news together as a family. That was what people did, 6 o'clock news. But it was a different time. I mean,
my television viewing was very limited. I was only allowed to watch so many hours of television a week, and certain programs were not allowed, like cartoons and what have you. I wasn't allowed to watch those certain cartoons. So watching TV for me was a treat, because I didn't get to do it very often.
Yeah, I watched cartoons.
I can't believe it. That is an atrocity.
I had a very
Your parents should be sued for child abuse.
My mother felt that my mother and father felt, and I'm sure my father went along with it. My mother felt that certain cartoons were too violent for me to watch.
And
well, I never, but you know what? I watched all that stuff, but I never remember wanting to poke somebody in the eye because the Three Stooges did it.
That's so
Right,
much
yeah.
right,
nonsense.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, Richard, I know you got a list. We're going to work off your list.
Okay.
I want to comment on something Virginia said.
Okay.
Today is Ralph Nader's 90th birthday.
Wow.
So various news outlets are interviewing him. And he brought up something with his parents, like you just brought up, Virginia. He said, I could still remember the day. He was talking about how his parents helped shape his ideas. And he said, I could still remember the day as a little kid I came home and I proudly said to my parents, Mom, Dad, I learned something new in school today. What'd you learn? I learned that Columbus discovered America. Father says, sit down, Ralph. Let me explain something to you. He didn't discover it. He invaded it.
Well,
Wow.
that story is very interesting. I was in first grade. This is a true story. I was in first grade at School 81 in the city of Buffalo, and my teacher's name was Miss Keene. And every day I had to report to my mother what we learned in school, at the dinner table. And I recited that poem that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492 and whatever. And I didn't know all of it yet, but I knew part of it. And my mother was very calm and very frank. And she said, when you go to school tomorrow morning, I want you to, and you get to this other part of the poem, I want you to raise your hand and I want you to ask the teacher how Christopher Columbus discovered a land where there was already people living. So, I was in first grade. And so that's what I did. I raised my hand. I did all that. And I ended up coming home crying because the teacher lambasted me. I was only in first grade. And I came home crying, and I kept it together till I got home. And I was crying, telling my mother. And the next day, my mother put on her fuchsia outfit and went to the school and informed the principal that I would not be reciting that poem and how dare they teach her child lies.
Wow, that's pretty progressive. My mother was
and
not.
She was wild. She came into the classroom and she was very polite with the teacher. I remember that. And she told the teacher that she just left the principal's office and that my daughter would not be learning the rest of the poem and to please never yell at her daughter again.
Which poem was this again?
You never heard that?
Something about
In 1492,
Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
sailed the ocean blue, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And there's more to it.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and I never learned the other part. And my mother said, you are not allowed to recite it. You will not recite it. And there will be no more consequences to you not reciting it. Now, she was something.
You had a different life than I did, because my parents, I don't think neither one of my father, I think my father may have gone to 1 year of high school, but my mother never made it to high school. They were Depression kids, and my mother was not interested in school. She ended up going to work when I think she was 15 when she dropped out of school. And my father had to go to work because he had to help support the family during the Depression.
Certainly.
So there was, although my father had, I was only 8 when my father died. So I only have hearsay of my father. He apparently had some innate intelligence and a very curious mind. So he was probably who I got my curious mind from, because my mother, I can tell you the story about when I went back to school and I was an archaeology student, and I was very excited because I got accepted at a field school where they were going to pay me, which was like unheard of. And I got so excited, and I went home and I was living upstairs from my mother, and I told my mother, I said, oh, I'm going to this field school, and they're going to pay my plane fare, and they're going to pay me to do the field school. And she said, well, what do you mean a field school? And I said, well, before history, there were people who lived places, but we don't know that much about them. So what we do is we dig up their stuff and we analyze it and we look at it, and we decide what they did, how they lived their lives, what they ate, what they did for entertainment, how they worshiped. And I'm going through this whole thing, and I'm so excited, and I'm like, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table with her, and she's like, really? Before there was writing? Does anybody really give a shit? So it's like, my mother, she had never been, she had no interest in traveling anywhere. She had no interest in anything except her family and her house. and she was limited that way, very limited scope. And so I must have gotten my curiosity from my father because my mother didn't have any, except she was curious about which stars slept with who. She did like those racy books about movie stars. That was a fun thing for her.
Tom, is Paul Dragem trying to get in? He wasn't paying attention. Okay, here comes Paul.
Oh, okay. Oh, we got half the show left.
Yeah.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Paul, wherever you are.
He's trying to set up a box for him.
Okay, that's good. So, yeah, I know I was the one, I got in trouble a lot for saying things at school, and my mother would go to school and she apologized for me, and she, promised them I would never say anything. Like, I had my sister moved to North Buffalo when I was a little kid. I never knew a Jewish person because in my neighborhood there was no such thing. So my sister moved to North Buffalo, and there was a little girl next door. I used to play with her, and I really liked her. I used to look forward to going to my sister's house so we could play. And I think I said something to her like, "So you don't believe in Jesus?" And she says, "No." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And that was like the end of that conversation.
Yeah, we can
hi,
hear
Paul.
you, Paul. We just can't see you yet. We're setting up a box for you.
I went to Catholic school, and I went back to school, and the nun is telling us that only Catholics go to heaven. And I raised my hand and I said, "No, that can't be true because I know this little girl and she's Jewish and she's really nice and she's going to heaven too." And they said, "No, only Catholics go to heaven." And I said, "No, you're wrong. I know you're wrong because God wouldn't do that. He wouldn't just send, anybody." And they put me in the corner for the rest of the day. And then of course my mother had to come to school, and she had to, basically explain to them, she's a little girl. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Of course, only Catholics go to heaven, So I was always the one who always thought about things and figured them out and got in trouble. My mother would always never go to school and say, "Oh, my daughter's right." It was always the nun's right. The nun is right. Paula couldn't possibly be right. She's weird.
Sounds like what happened to me. But at my Catholic school, they told us that Catholics went to a specific part of heaven and Jews went to another part, and every religion had its own part of heaven.
You're a little younger than I am, so they changed things a little bit.
Yeah.
But
So they believed in universal atonement to a certain degree. Interesting. I didn't know the Catholics believed in that.
Well, there's after they got rid of purgatory, they changed a lot of stuff. But, when I was a little girl in school, there was still purgatory.
Yeah, you have to burn for a little bit before you can go to the good place. What a joke that was.
Well, not burn. You had to go someplace, and it was without God. It was a place.
That was stupid.
It was a place without God, and people had to pray for you to get you out of purgatory.
What a joke.
A place between heaven and hell, a limbo.
Yeah.
Yeah, limbo. Yeah, that's where the unbaptized babies went to limbo.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That was a joke.
Well,
Yeah. All of it was. All of it is.
How's it going, Paul?
Well, we got some snow today. About a foot or so. Yeah, it's pretty cold. It's about 15 degrees.
Woo!
We're getting snow here too.
Yeah.
Let's have a little sympathy for the people in Sweden. Coldest winter in their entire history, 40 degrees below zero.
Oh
Wow.
my God!
God.
Wow.
Wow.
I know that Tom said there was snow. There was a lot of snow, Tom, in Lancaster.
There's a bit.
A bit.
When you say a bit, I mean measure it in inches.
There's not much, but the roads were a bit slippery.
Oh, slick. Okay. Yeah,
I was
we
in
got
I was in Dakota, and it was 40 below zero. That was fun.
Can you actually go outside and breathe in that?
You can. It's. I remember starting my car, and I looked at and I went back in the hotel,
Did you
let
take
the
a
car
blanket?
car warm up, and then I observed a pile of snow underneath the exhaust and built up like a little pyramid. So it was kind of
Oh,
funny.
God.
Oh, so
Yeah,
the
I-
exhaust was crystallizing and falling
Yeah.
down. And wow.
Thank
Wow. Did anybody ever do that trick where you take boiling water?
Yep.
You take a
Yeah.
cup of boiling water, and if it's cold enough outside and you go outside with the water and you throw it in the air, it turns into snow instantly.
Yeah. Or steam.
Wow.
Most. Yeah.
Has that ever,
Interesting.
It's a beautiful thing to see.
has that
Yeah.
really happened?
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
done it many
yeah.
times.
You have?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It's got to be boiling for some reason. And when you throw it, don't throw it over your head. Throw it away from you. You know what
And
I
how
mean?
cold out does it have to be outside for that?
How cold does it have to be for that to happen, Paul? Is
In
it,
the single digits.
yeah, single digits.
Oh, so not even
and the
below
reason-
0?
That is the single digits below 0.
Wait a minute.
No.
Or not?
if
No,
one-
0. Okay,
yeah.
I'm thinking Celsius. Never mind. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in a different country there, Paul.
Ah,
Um,
that's right. That's
Does it ever
right.
throw you off when they talk in the other measurements?
No, not really. The reason it's got to be boiling is because it's so hot that when it hits the cold air, that it's just going to evaporate so quick. That's what makes it explode like that.
Wow. I've never been any place where I've been in Buffalo when it's been below 0, but I've never been any place where it's, like Minnesota or one of those places where it gets really, really bitterly cold.
Go to the Arctic.
That's probably not on my bucket list there, Paul.
No, mine either. It's cold enough here as it is. I was contemplating going out today because it's very windy. It's probably almost 30-mile-an-hour winds. I was going to go down to one of the ocean coves and get some crashing waves into the cliffs, but I wasn't motivated enough to go do that. I want to stand out there.
Does your car stay warm when you're out in the cold like that? Can you take pictures from your car is what I'm trying to say, I guess.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you could. Like anything else, you can take pictures from your car, wherever you want.
Yeah. Because I don't know if the windows get so steamed up or so foggy.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So
No different than Buffalo.
do we have anything on your list that
Can we pick
cover?
up? Can we pick up where we left off last week about Cher's son?
Sure. Do you have any new information?
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so he gets this monthly allowance from a trust which she set up, and now she's appealing to the court. I want somebody else besides him to get the money, somebody responsible who he will have to report to, because he's using that money to buy drug and he's killing himself. So I asked the questions. When you have a child who is slowly killing himself on drugs, who's more at fault, you or the society he lives in?
Well, you know what Carl Jung says? I said I was going to bring Carl Jung in my back pocket.
Yeah. What's
Carl
that?
Jung says that the job of every psychologist is to help the patient to optimize their potentials in the society that made them sick in the first place.
Ah,
I'm going to remember that quote.
Well, it's not exact. It's not exact, Richard, but that's basically what he said.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Carl Jung.
Now you can have, let's say you have 3 kids, right? You have 3 children. One can turn out to be, responsible person who follows the traditional path and is, is somebody that you are proud of as a parent because, that's what you want. You want a traditional child. And then you have another child who maybe is a little less traditional and they are, they're an artist or they're a musician and they want to do something different with their lives. And that one you're worried about, but, you figure they got to follow their own path. And then you got the one that's just a
Serial killer.
you're right, tremendous fuck up in some way or another, right? Like, but they're all raised by the same parents, pretty much. I mean, there's always a little bit of a difference, but pretty much the same upbringing. But they may, branch okay. So society gives everyone an opportunity to make these bad choices. But the good kid is more likely to say no to these choices. And the middle kid, who is creative, might say, ooh, maybe I'd like to see what that's about. But the other one is going to say, yeah, sure. What do you got? So is it the parents' fault? Is it society's fault for making these things available? Or is it something systemic in the person themselves that makes them more susceptible to these kinds of decisions?
Mm-hmm.
So do we blame only society and only the parents, or do we put some blame on the choices made by the individual?
It keeps falling.
I can't say. I know nice people who have really crappy kids. They're not.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of their kids are crappy, but
Well, I have a question. How old is this son?
This one from Cher?
The Cher,
Cher's son. How old is he?
I'm going to look it up. All right, let's see.
Thank you.
Because if it's a trust fund, you're thinking the kid's older than a kid, right?
Are we back on the share thing
Yeah.
from last
Yeah.
week?
Okay, so holy simoles.
What?
One is 54 and one is 47.
Yes,
so
yeah, I
these
told you
are
there was
these
two
are
of them.
adults.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, she's old. She's,
Yeah.
She's 80.
Yeah.
Wow.
And still going strong.
With her young boyfriend. I love it. I love it.
So
Gordon knows her very well, apparently.
so apparently
So I guess there's another question.
Yeah.
Is that regardless of which one it was or
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
they're both adults.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So they're both adults. So does she even have the right to get involved at the level she wants to get involved? She
Well-
can stop the money at any time.
Yeah, but if you're a parent, you don't want your kid to. I mean, first of all, is the trust fund responsible for the kid not having to strive to be a self-sustaining adult?
Right.
Is the trust fund the problem, and not the drugs?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, like John D. Rockefeller said to his children, I'm not giving any of you anything from my will, because if you don't work to get your own wealth, you're never going to become a good person.
Interesting.
Did he follow
A true
through on that?
Yeah,
capitalist.
he did. Believe it or not, he did.
A true capitalist.
Although I would say that the name helped a lot.
Oh, yeah, I know. You walk in with the Rockefeller.
Yeah, like
and
Nelson Rockefeller went to Princeton. I think when he put his name on the application, I think they put a star next to it in the admissions office.
yeah. Well, he also, I'm sure his father owned a building there too. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't hurt to have the power.
So basically she's asking for the same thing to happen to her son that happened to Britney Spears, kind of like, but Britney Spears worked though. She worked, and she couldn't manage her own money that she made from work. So that was
It's very similar.
that was the difference.
Fame was she didn't know how to handle fame. Fame is hard. People who have fame, they're not living in the real world anymore. They're living in an altered state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because so much of our identity is what other people tell us. And
Yeah.
if people give us these unrealistic portraits of who we are, it's going to mess up your mind.
What is that, Paul?
Good point, Richard. Good point.
That's That was my kidney stone.
It's highly magnified.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Paul, it's like really beautiful.
It is.
Yeah, it's almost like it's illuminated from inside.
It was so beautiful, it hurt excruciatingly.
I've had 3 of those myself. I know how they hurt.
Well, that was my first question to Paul is what are you doing to prevent another one from happening?
Yeah, nothing you can really do. You get them, you know.
You got to eat lots of lemon.
there are basically 2 types of
drink-
kidney stones.
I drink.
One
Yeah,
that
there's
you get
cats.
from diet, and one that you just get because you get them. There's 2
No,
different
well,
kinds.
there's the 2 different kinds are either calcium or protein, and once you start getting them, you're prone to getting them. So you're supposed to just drink a lot of water, lemon juice, that kind of stuff.
Lemonade. That's what Greg drinks
Yep.
because he had that too. And the doctor prescribed, and he's been drinking the lemonade religiously, and not his. He's never had one again.
Made with real lemons,
Yeah, oh yeah, real lemons. Yeah.
not country time.
No,
Yeah. So
it's got to be real lemons. I take a whole lemon and I put it in my blender, and the skin and everything, and then I drink that through the course of the day.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Well,
Lovely.
yeah,
That is a great way to consume your lemon.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
because you're getting the whole thing. Is it?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Is the pith really supposed to be eaten though? The thing underneath the skin.
There's such a small amount of
Okay.
cyanide
Yeah,
or anything like that. You can drink. So what I do is I put like a half a gallon or a quart of distilled water in with the lemon. I put it in. I got one of those Vitamix blenders, and it pulverizes it, and then I just pour it into a container, refrigerate it, and then I have it through the course of the day.
you do have a strategy.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, I'll change it to something
Yeah,
else.
please do. Thank you.
Good. That's pretty.
It's causing me to have flashbacks.
Yeah.
Would you like another thing from my list?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, now I've mentioned this before, but there's a new wrinkle on this experiment that I thought was brilliant. In the 1970s, Walter Mischel was a psychologist. So he brought children into the laboratory and he said, okay, here's a marshmallow. If you eat it now, that's fine. But if you leave it on the table for 5 minutes, I will come back and I'll give you 2, and you can have 2 marshmallows. Then
I've seen that experiment.
and then he
Yeah.
started the clock. All right. Now, the purpose of the experiment was the kids' parents were involved in this, obviously. They agreed, obviously, for a fee, that the psychologist could check in with the children after like 8 years and 16 years and 24 years to see how their lives evolved, if they were the immediate gratification type or if they were the delayed gratification type. And he found that people who had delayed gratification, they had longer terms of education, they had higher paying jobs, they had marriages that didn't end in divorce, things like that. Now, somebody who was reading about the experiment from a different department at the university wrote to Walter and he said, Walter, you made a bad mistake with the way you conducted that experiment. He said, what you should have done is you should have brought all the kids in the room after the experiment was done, and you should have had children raise their hands who delayed it, and then have the other children raise their hands who wanted it right away. They didn't care about the future. And Walter said, why would I do that? And he said, because often you will be inspired by something someone else does, and you will change yourself. And I thought that was brilliant. Like the way he did it, the kids didn't know who chose what.
Yeah, but also if you could also be inspired the other way.
You could.
And somebody would raise their hand and say, I just ate my marshmallow and it was delicious.
Yeah.
you might say, wait a minute, why did I wait
You could.
to eat my marshmallow?
You could.
You know, it wasn't.
too.
So you could
Yeah,
get two.
that's true. That's true. So I mean, I think it works both ways. But yeah, I mean, I wonder what would have happened to those kids if they would have taken note.
Oh, who's that big kid in the background?
There's a big that's Gregory James Sterlace. He is not participating. He's watching a football game.
Hello there.
Oh, that's right.
Author and filmmaker extraordinaire.
He is Mr. Mr. Popularity, Greg Sterlace.
How many books has he published now?
7.
Oh.
Is he a millionaire yet?
No.
And 5
we don't.
movies.
We never make money on anything we do, Paul. Ever. We've never had that opportunity. Or I mean, it's fun to do the projects. It would be nice if somebody paid us a lot of money to do something, but we don't. If they were only pay us because we're doing what they want us to do, we wouldn't want to do that either. So there.
Hey, whatever works for you.
Yeah, I mean, yes, are there things I probably could make money at if I wanted to? Yeah, but then I'd have to concentrate on that and not go with my inspiration. Speaking of inspiration, I finished my presentation and the slideshow that goes along with it. So I am ready to rock. I just got to start rehearsing it. It's, you know what? Being laid up like this isn't so bad because it helps me to stay in one place and concentrate on what I'm supposed to be doing.
And what exactly is that?
She's giving a talk.
Well, I was supposed to have finished this talk a long time ago, like maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and because I like to keep on the move. I wasn't doing it, but now that I'm stuck in the house with my space boot, I can't go anywhere.
Space boot.
So
Very
Now,
good.
I have a question. So, do you take that boot off at any time?
just when I shower. So it comes off like every other day. I shower every other day, and I have a chair that I can sit on. It comes over my tub, and I sit on it, and I scooch over so I don't have to put any pressure on that leg.
Yeah, Jen
So
has one of those.
Yeah, so it's just it's not ideal, but at least I get clean, because otherwise you sit around stewing in your own juices all day.
That doesn't sound good.
No, it doesn't. But I'm happy to get that, to take my shower. But that's the only time I take it off. I sleep in it. It's not particularly comfortable. But he said 4 to 6 weeks, and I certainly don't want to have the painful surgery that I'd have to have if I screw it up.
Right.
So I'm listening to the doctor. And so I'm reading a lot. I'm reading on my phone, so I don't have to get up. And then I'm reading my book, my Shaw, and I'm reading a book of short stories that Brian, where is Brian these days? I'm reading a book of short stories that Brian gave me, and some of these short stories are really difficult to read. There's a lot of, they're from the early part of the 20th century, and there's a lot of, horrific stories about race problems and nightmarish almost. A guy getting his knees broken over a log.
Ouch.
And I mean, just horrible, and it's like, then I read right before I go to sleep, and then I'm squirming all night thinking I'm gonna dream about that. But what is that? Is that an eyeball?
That's an eyeball of a puffin bird.
What is there? Something's being reflected in there. It looks like a house or something.
Well, I'm in the background, and that's so yeah. That's not a house. It's probably some rocks. Probably some rocks.
Okay. Very interesting. Very abstract, Paul. Very abstract. Nice, interesting.
How did you get so close to the bird's eye?
Oh, he's got one of those lenses.
Zoom lens.
Wow.
Oh, thank you. So yes, Tom was here this week, and he set everything up for me. He set up the light, he set up the microphone, he set up the new computer. So all is well in the house of Wachowiak.
So he's your son now, right?
He has been my son. He's been my son since I met him.
Oh, you adopted him. Okay.
Yeah, very, very long ago. I was just talking to somebody about that. When I think I was about 40-ish or something, and I think, Tom, when you started coming over to the Home of the Future, how old were you?
Early 20s.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, me too. That's about how old I was.
Yeah. So those were our new recruits for the Home of the Future. There's always a young batch of people that comes in at some point. I try to keep everything fresh. But so I adopted all three of them. All of Navum.
Oh.
Yes, they're my pseudo children.
Mm-hmm.
But Tom's my favorite. But don't tell anyone.
Well, you better hope the others aren't watching the show.
Oh yeah, like there's a chance they're watching the show. Okay. I find I don't care. That's the thing. I do this for me. I don't care who watches. I do it for me. But we got 3 minutes and 8 seconds left, Richard.
5 seconds.
Do we?
You want me to say something?
Yeah. Do you have something else? I know you have a long list. I usually try to make a list and I don't.
There's a punk band called Green Day, and they were asked and given a lot of money to play at a New Year's Eve celebration.
I saw them.
You saw them on TV, ABC?
Yeah,
They
I saw them too.
changed one of their classic songs. They changed the lyrics to, "I'm not part of the MAGA agenda."
Oh.
The next day, within 24 hours, people on Twitter, obviously from the MAGA crowd, were denouncing them left and right. And they were saying things like this: "You are not being true to your punk roots because you're delving into politics." But if you think about that, isn't punk in its very nature political?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it's anti-society, anti-establishment. So no, they're not being there. That's actually a very punk thing to say. I think. I'm so
Virginia, Virginia, were you influenced by the punk movement?
Not really. I'm more of a jazz type of listener and classical.
Yeah, I like to listen to new music all the way. I mean, I started out, in the 60s with the Supremes and the Motown stuff, and then I went through the rock and there's always something I like that's new. I'm not that I like jazz fusion, like Steely Dan kind of stuff and Spyro Gyra, but I guess I'm not sophisticated enough for jazz.
I don't think you have to be sophisticated at all.
Yeah, I somehow think it is. I like classical music. In fact, I gravitate toward that. And when I'm sad, I gravitate toward classical music because it doesn't have lyrics. So it doesn't manipulate me in any way. But I have a hard time with jazz. I just always have. Don't tell Connie. Although I've seen her husband play and I loved his music.
30 seconds.
Maybe it's live. It's live jazz I can listen to, but on its own. Okay, so we're getting close. I want to thank everybody for participating. I'm sorry we didn't get you till the second half, Paul. Thank you, Sal. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Virginia. And thank you, Paula.
Till we
And thank
meet
you,
again.
Tom. Thank you, Tom, for everything and being my son. Okay.
Ape.
All right.